That evening started out like so many others had before. Just another family dinner at my sister-in-law Rachel's place, something we'd been doing regularly for years. I'd always thought of those dinners as safe, a chance to unwind from the daily grind, reconnect with family, and enjoy a home-cooked meal. But this night, something about it stuck with me, a feeling I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried to push it down. Lisa and I arrived right around 7. The sky outside had just shifted into that perfect twilight blue, the kind that makes everything look a little more forgiving. Rachel's house, a classic two-story in the suburbs, was warm and inviting, lit by soft lamps and the glow from the kitchen. The smell of roasting herbs and fresh bread drifted through the air. Her husband, Tom, was bustling about, playing the perfect host like always, joking with Lisa's brother while Rachel greeted us at the door with her usual bright smile. As we settled around the dining table, the conversation flowed easily. Old stories, work updates, light teasing, and I could tell Lisa was a little quieter than usual. That alone was odd. Lisa's never been shy about making her voice heard, whether it's talking business or just sharing a funny story. Tonight, though, she was sitting a little straighter, her eyes scanning the room as if measuring reactions, calculating something beneath the surface. I caught her looking at me a few times with this strange, guarded expression, like she was waiting for me to notice something, but unsure if she should say it. When Rachel brought out the wine, Lisa was the one to pour for me. I watched closely as the liquid filled the glass, but then something stopped me cold. The wine looked wrong, oddly cloudy. It was that kind of cloudiness you might expect in a glass left out too long, or a poorly stored bottle. But Rachel's wine collection was normally impeccable, and Lisa would never pour anything questionable. Still, there it was, a swirl of faint sediment suspended in the deep red liquid. Catching the candlelight in a way that made it look murky and unappetizing, I lifted the glass slowly, angling it under the chandelier's light, trying to convince myself it was just an optical illusion. But no, those faint strands of something floated inside, like dust in a jar of liquid. And then the smell hit me, a subtle metallic tang, almost like rusty iron or pennies left in water. It was faint, but unmistakable if you knew what to look for. Not at all like the smooth, fruity bouquet I expected. My stomach clenched. Something about the whole scene felt off. My mind raced back through the past year, the headaches I'd chalked up to stress, the sudden dizziness I felt after dinners here, the fatigue that seemed to grip me only after visiting Rachel and Lisa. I remembered the nights I struggled to sleep, waking up with a sour taste in my mouth and a vague sense of nausea that lingered, always after being at their house. Back then, I'd told myself it was nothing, maybe a virus, bad allergies, or just life wearing me down. But now, staring at that cloudy wine, the pieces started to align in a way that sent a cold wave through me. Lisa caught me staring, her expression unreadable. She gave a small, tight smile, but there was something else behind it, something guarded, maybe even calculating. Rachel was laughing across the table, chatting easily with her husband, but every so often I caught her eyes flicker toward me, just long enough to feel deliberate. It was like a silent code being passed back and forth between them, a quiet communication meant to keep me guessing. I wanted to say something, to ask why the wine was cloudy, to voice my suspicion. But the words caught in my throat. Accusing your own family of something like this? It felt unreal, almost cruel. The thought of creating a rift, of shattering what was left of trust between us, was terrifying. But worse was the idea of ignoring it, of pretending nothing was wrong while something sinister was brewing right under my nose. So I kept quiet. I set the glass down carefully, without taking a sip, telling myself to stay calm, to watch and gather evidence before jumping to conclusions. I needed proof, because if I was wrong, if this was just an honest mistake or a bad bottle, then I'd have made a terrible scene for nothing. But if I was right, well, the consequences could be catastrophic. As the night went on, I tried to focus on the conversation, but my mind was elsewhere, running scenarios through my head like a film on repeat. Why would Lisa and Rachel do this? What were they hoping to gain? Jealousy? Resentment? Was this about me personally, or did it have something to do with my job, my reputation? It wasn't like me to suspect people I loved, but sometimes love blinds you to harsh realities. I thought about my work, how competitive and ruthless my industry could be, and how important it was for me to maintain every ounce of credibility and health. One wrong move, one incident, could unravel years of hard-earned success. I felt trapped between disbelief and dread. The cozy warmth of Rachel's home, the laughter echoing in the background, all felt like a facade hiding something dangerous. And that glass of cloudy wine was the first crack in the perfect mask. I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to take a turn into territory I'd never expected. A battle not just for my career, but for my very safety. The glass of wine Lisa poured for me that evening was different. And I wasn't just talking about the strange, cloudy appearance. It was subtle, something a lot of people wouldn't notice, especially in a bustling family dinner setting. But I saw it right away. The usual rich, translucent crimson was replaced by this dull, foggy swirl that caught the candlelight in a weird, unsettling way. I sat there, across from Rachel's place at the long, polished table, a finely set arrangement that looked more like a stage than a family meal. Lisa was at my side, smiling with that practiced warmth she always wore when guests were around. But the smile didn't reach her eyes. There was a coldness there that didn't belong, like the calm before a storm. I'd been feeling this way for months, a slow buildup of unease whenever we gathered at Rachel and Lisa's house. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just the physical symptoms, the fatigue that drained me hours after each visit, the headaches that never had a clear cause, the sudden chills despite the summer heat. It was the way things felt orchestrated, as if I were playing a role in a twisted play where I was the only one who didn't have the script. Tonight, the wine was the final clue. My gut screamed that Lisa had slipped something into it, and if she did, it wasn't a one-off mistake. It was deliberate. I had to act, but carefully. I couldn't just accuse or react. If I made a scene, they'd know I suspected something and double down on their game. No, I needed proof. I needed to turn their trap against them. The chatter around the table was light. The usual family banter about work, the kids, upcoming vacations. Rachel was laughing at some joke Lisa told, and her glass of wine gleamed with a deep ruby clarity, the perfect contrast to mine. I watched them both, weighing every movement, every glance. Then Rachel got up, mentioning she'd go grab another bottle from the kitchen. That was my chance. I waited for Lisa to lean forward to fill someone else's glass. Her hands were steady, controlled, but in that brief moment, I slipped my hand over and gently nudged my glass of cloudy wine closer. At the same time, I picked up Rachel's crystal-clear glass, smooth, cool, and unmistakably pure. The switch had to be flawless. Slowly, silently, I swapped the glasses. It was a delicate move, too fast or too clumsy, and everyone would notice. But I was careful, almost mechanical, like a magician executing a sleight of hand. My fingers brushed the stem of the glass just enough to steady it without attracting attention. I slid Rachel's glass toward me, setting it gently down in front of me, and placed my cloudy wine glass where Rachel's clear one had been. The table continued its rhythm, forks clinking against plates, low murmurs of conversation. But I could feel the tension coiling in my chest like a spring ready to snap. Rachel returned, smiling as she sat down, and without hesitation reached for what she thought was her glass. I couldn't tear my eyes away. The moment her lips touched the rim, time slowed. Her face shifted in ways you don't see until it's too late. The brief flicker of surprise, the tightening around her eyes, that tiny gasp she tried to stifle. She set the glass down quickly, more forcefully than before, and swallowed hard. Her cheeks flushed an odd pale color, and she pressed a trembling hand against her stomach. I don't feel right," she said, her voice cracking slightly, betraying the calm she was desperately trying to keep. Lisa's head snapped toward Rachel, but instead of concern, her expression was a mask, carefully rehearsed sympathy with a hint of something else, something I couldn't quite place in that glance. The coldness was back, and it felt like a knife in my gut. Rachel's breath hitched, and she slowly stood, clutching the back of her chair for support as she made her way down the hallway toward the bathroom. The room went quiet. Everyone had noticed the shift, even if no one could explain it yet. I sank back in my chair, hands trembling slightly but face calm. I had done what I needed to do. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was reality. The cloudy wine wasn't an accident. It was a weapon. And Rachel was its unintended victim tonight, a cruel mirror of what had been happening to me in secret. Pulling my phone from my pocket, I discreetly hit the record button, the little red light hidden beneath the table, and started capturing every word, every glance. I knew Lisa and Rachel's whispers, their exchanged texts, the cold glances. They were pieces of a puzzle, and tonight I was finally collecting the last pieces. As Rachel leaned against the bathroom door, pale and shaking, I realized this wasn't just a family issue anymore. It was a battle for my sanity, my health, and my career. They had been playing a long game, and tonight I had made my first real move in this dangerous chess match. The silence at the table was thick, the air heavy with questions no one dared voice aloud. But inside me, a fierce determination burned. This silent swap was my quiet act of defiance, and a beginning of a fight I was ready to win, no matter the cost. After that night with the cloudy wine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was at play, and not just a one-time slip-up. This was personal, calculated, and designed to hurt me in ways I hadn't fully grasped yet. The strange taste, the odd smell, the way Lisa's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It all gnawed at me, but I knew that suspicion alone wasn't enough. I needed concrete evidence, something undeniable. In the days that followed, I became hyper-aware of every detail. I started keeping a journal of all the little odd moments, unexplained headaches after visiting Rachel's house, subtle remarks Lisa made when she thought I wasn't listening, strange phone calls Rachel received late at night. I wasn't the kind of guy to jump to conclusions, but the puzzle pieces were starting to fit together in a chilling picture. One afternoon, scrolling through my phone's message history out of a mix of anxiety and determination, I noticed some texts between Lisa and Rachel that had previously slipped under my radar. At first glance, they looked innocuous, casual chats about the kids, upcoming family events. But then, I spotted a series of texts filled with strange code words and vague references. Is the plan still on for tonight? Keep him distracted. Don't let him see the documents. Make sure the delivery is late. It wasn't just coincidence anymore. It was a pattern, and I was at the center of it. I remembered the times Lisa would suddenly change the subject when I walked into a room, or the way Rachel's laughter sometimes sounded forced when I was around. The jealousy had clearly evolved into something darker, but I couldn't just accuse them without proof. So, the following weekend, when Lisa and Rachel came over for coffee, I set up a small, discreet recording device in the corner of the living room. My hands trembled as I positioned it behind a potted plant, hoping they wouldn't notice. The thought of spying on my own wife and sister-in-law made me uneasy, but I had to know the truth. My gut told me this was the only way. The conversation started off normally enough, light chatter about the weather, work, and family. But as the minutes ticked by, the tone shifted subtly. I caught Lisa's voice drop low, her words laced with frustration and something colder, more calculated. I told him the wine was just cloudy because of the heat, she said quietly, almost smugly. But he's getting suspicious. We need to act fast. Rachel responded sharply, her voice tense and angry. He's already too close. If he ruins the client pitch next week, we lose everything. No more mistakes. Their words hit me like a blow. This wasn't just about the wine or a petty grudge. This was a coordinated effort to sabotage my career, to take away everything I'd worked for. The betrayal cut deep, knowing it came from the two people I was supposed to trust most. I kept the recorder running, heart pounding, as they plotted further. There were plans to tamper with my work files, spread rumors at my company, even sabotage my meetings by planting false information. Each detail was more shocking than the last. Listening to them, I realized how carefully they'd orchestrated this campaign against me. It wasn't just envy. It was cold, ruthless, and designed to destroy not only my professional reputation, but my mental and physical health as well. After the recording ended, I sat alone in the silence of my living room, trying to process what I'd just heard. The weight of betrayal was crushing, but so was the resolve that started to build inside me. I couldn't let them win. From that moment, I began compiling everything: the recording, the suspicious texts, the timeline of strange illnesses and setbacks. I documented each incident meticulously, knowing that if this ever went to court, I needed an airtight case. At the same time, I kept my guard up around Lisa and Rachel, careful not to reveal what I'd discovered. The thought that they might try something worse if they found out terrified me. Every smile they gave me felt like a mask hiding venom. The next step was clear. I had to bring this to the police, but I also knew I had to prepare myself for a long battle, not just for justice, but for my own sanity and survival. This wasn't just about a cloudy glass of wine anymore. It was about exposing a web of lies, deceit, and betrayal spun by the two people who were supposed to have my back. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope, because now I had the truth on my side. After weeks of living with this gnawing suspicion and gathering every shred of evidence I could, I finally made the decision to take it to the police. It wasn't easy. I kept second-guessing myself, wondering if I was blowing things out of proportion, or if this was really as serious as it felt. But after the latest incident, when Rachel took that sip from the cloudy wine and suddenly looked so sick, I knew I couldn't just keep silent and hope it all went away. This was beyond family drama. This was a calculated attempt to harm me. So, one rainy afternoon, I walked into the local police station, clutching my phone filled with recordings, printouts of text messages, and my detailed notes. The place had that familiar scent of stale coffee and worn leather chairs, with officers bustling about in the background. I approached the front desk and explained my situation as calmly as I could. They scheduled me for an interview with Detective Harper, who they assured me specialized in cases involving personal harm and complex interpersonal disputes. When I arrived at the precinct for the interview, I was led into a small, windowless room, the kind you see in crime shows. The walls were a dull beige, and the only furniture was a metal table and 2 chairs. Detective Harper entered shortly after. He was in his mid-40s, with a weathered but sharp face and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. His demeanor was professional, but not cold. He shook my hand firmly and gestured for me to sit. "Mr. Collins," he began, flipping open a notebook, "tell me exactly what happened from the beginning." I took a deep breath and started from the first time I noticed something off during one of our family gatherings. The metallic smell in Lisa's wine glass, the strange illnesses I and others experienced after visiting Rachel's home, and my growing doubts over the past year. I told him about the cloudy wine during the last dinner, the subtle but persistent feeling that something was very wrong. Then, I played him the recording I had made during a private conversation between Lisa and Rachel, where they explicitly discussed their plan to undermine me. Watching his face as he listened, I could see the seriousness settle in. I handed over my phone, and he replayed the tape a couple of times, jotting down notes. I also presented copies of text messages between Lisa and Rachel, where they exchanged cryptic remarks about taking care of Mark and making sure he can't move forward. I explained how I swapped the wine glasses silently during that dinner to confirm my suspicions, and how Rachel became violently ill after drinking the cloudy wine meant for me. Throughout the interview, Detective Harper asked detailed questions about my work, my relationships, the history between me, Lisa, and Rachel, and any other incidents I might have overlooked. I was candid, even when it hurt, because I knew my honesty was essential to building a case. What surprised me most was how seriously he took everything. He didn't dismiss my concerns as paranoia or a typical family feud. Instead, he acknowledged that the evidence pointed to something more sinister: deliberate poisoning, manipulation, and attempts to sabotage my personal and professional life. Detective Harper also shared something I didn't expect. Lisa and Rachel had a history with the police, not for anything violent, but for various manipulative behaviors and incidents involving others who had reported similar harassment and sabotage. This revelation was chilling. It confirmed that I wasn't imagining things, and that they had a pattern of targeting people who stood in their way. Over the next several days, the police quietly began their investigation. They collected samples of the wine, tested them for toxins, and interviewed neighbors and friends who might have witnessed unusual behavior. They even looked into Lisa and Rachel's financials and communications to see if there was a larger scheme at play. Meanwhile, I stayed vigilant. I changed my routines, kept a close eye on what I ate and drank, and leaned on a few trusted friends for support. The strain of living under suspicion and threat was exhausting, but the police involvement gave me hope. Detective Harper told me to be patient. These cases take time, and the legal system moves slowly, but he promised they would do everything possible to protect me and get to the truth. Leaving the precinct that day, I felt like a weight had been lifted, but also that a new battle had just begun. The silence I had lived under was broken, but now the fight was out in the open, and I wasn't alone anymore. Walking into that courtroom for the first time felt like stepping into the epicenter of a storm I hadn't fully prepared for. The room was grand but cold, with towering wooden walls polished to a dark shine. a large bench where the judge presided like a monarch over the proceedings, and rows upon rows of seats filled with strangers, jurors, reporters, family members, and curious onlookers. The air was thick with tension, and the hum of whispered conversations added an eerie backdrop to the heavy silence that occasionally descended when the judge called the court to order. From the moment the trial began, it was clear this would be a battle of endurance as much as evidence. The prosecution opened with a statement that felt like a hammer blow. They would prove beyond reasonable doubt that my wife Lisa and my sister-in-law Rachel had conspired to poison me. The idea was surreal, almost cinematic, but as I sat there watching the attorneys lay out their case with cold precision, the pieces I had collected over many months began to fit together like a grim puzzle. Day after day, we waded through testimony and exhibits. The toxicology reports came first. A team of forensic scientists detailed their meticulous analysis of the wine samples, explaining in painstaking detail how the cloudy wine contained traces of a toxic chemical that could cause severe illness. Their expert witness described the process of testing the wine rim, the glasses, and the bottles, showing photos and lab results that left no doubt about tampering. The jury watched closely as she explained the symptoms I had suffered, tying them directly to the poison's effects. Lisa's defense team was aggressive. Their strategy was to paint the whole thing as a tragic misunderstanding, or worse, my own paranoia fueled by stress. They questioned the experts, attempting to introduce doubt by arguing the discoloration was caused by a natural defect in the wine, or that my symptoms were psychosomatic. But every time they tried to chip away at the evidence, the prosecution had a counter. The chain of custody was airtight, the lab work impeccable, and the text messages and recorded conversations undeniable proof of premeditation. One of the hardest parts was taking the stand myself. Sitting in the witness chair beneath the intense glare of courtroom lights, I felt exposed and vulnerable, but I knew this was my moment to speak the truth. I described the subtle but unsettling changes over the past year, how I'd sometimes feel dizzy and nauseous after dinners at Rachel's house, how Lisa's behavior shifted from loving to cold and secretive, and how I had begun noticing the odd, cloudy wine she poured that night. I recounted the night I swapped the glasses, the quiet, desperate act that had saved me but confirmed my fears. I spoke about the fear that had taken root deep inside me, the sleepless nights wondering if I was overreacting or if I was truly in danger. Speaking aloud about betrayal by the two closest people in my life was emotionally draining. My voice cracked at times, and I fought back tears as I revealed how the poisoning wasn't just an attack on my body, but a calculated attempt to destroy everything I'd worked for. Lisa's lawyer was relentless during cross-examination, accusing me of paranoia and attempting to discredit my character by suggesting I had motives to fabricate the story, perhaps to cover professional mistakes or family disputes. But the tapes I had secretly recorded during conversations between Lisa and Rachel shattered those claims. The jury listened intently as their cold, calculating voices discussed ways to ruin me professionally and personally, plotting the timing and method of the poisonings. Those recordings were the turning point of the trial. Adding weight to the prosecution's case, a former colleague of Lisa's took the stand. She testified about Lisa's history of toxic behavior in the workplace, how she'd sabotaged projects, spread malicious rumors, and manipulated people to climb the corporate ladder. This testimony painted a picture of a woman who was no stranger to deceit and cruelty, giving the jury insight into her character and possible motives. As the trial progressed, I noticed Rachel growing visibly distressed on the witness stand, her usually confident demeanor unraveling under the pressure of the evidence. The combined weight of the forensic proof, the digital evidence, and witness testimonies left little room for doubt. The defense's claims of coincidence or misunderstanding fell apart, revealing a chilling pattern of intentional harm. When closing arguments came, the prosecution summarized the case with conviction and clarity. Lisa and Rachel had orchestrated a campaign of poisoning and defamation, driven by jealousy and greed, aimed at ruining my health, reputation, and career. The defense, by contrast, pleaded for mercy and painted the situation as an unfortunate family dispute blown out of proportion. The jury's deliberation stretched into 2 full days. The wait was agonizing. Every moment outside that courtroom was filled with uncertainty and a gnawing fear of injustice. But finally, the foreperson rose to deliver the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Relief and exhaustion hit me simultaneously. Justice had been served, but the emotional toll was immense. Lisa and Rachel were sentenced to multiple years behind bars for attempted poisoning, conspiracy, and a series of related charges. The court made clear that such betrayal, especially from those closest to you, would not be tolerated. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt a complicated mixture of vindication and sorrow. My world had been shattered and then painstakingly rebuilt, piece by piece. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but the trial's outcome marked the end of a dark chapter and the beginning of my journey toward healing and reclaiming my life. A year after the trial, I started rebuilding my life and career. I spoke at a business seminar about overcoming betrayal and staying strong. Sharing my story helped me connect with others and regain trust from clients. Slowly but surely, I regained my reputation and confidence. This experience taught me the power of resilience and trusting yourself, and now I'm ready to move forward stronger than before.